I am Reed. I am 27, just an average dude. I've made tons of money mistakes in my 20s, and now I want to share everything I've learned to help you take control of your finances and your life. Oh shit, you guys, have I got a story for you today. This isn't just some dry finance lecture. This is a real life high stakes drama that unfolded in the global nickel market, and trust me, it's got lessons for all of us, especially if you are trying to get your money right in your 20s. Like I am talking about how a massive Chinese company, Tsingshan Holdings, almost got absolutely annihilated by Wall Street, and how the entire financial system almost went down with it. It's like something out of a movie, but it actually happened, and it's a brutal reminder of how fragile things can be and why you gotta be smart about your money. So picture this, it's early, 2022, Tsingshan Holdings, a huge Chinese company, a titan in the nickel industry, had made a massive bet they were shorting nickel, which basically means they were betting the price of nickel would go down. They shorted 150,000 tons of nickel on the London Metal Exchange, or LME. Now, shorting is a risky game, but Tsingshan thought they had it figured out. They produce a lot of nickel, so they figured they could just deliver their own nickel if prices went up, hedging their risk. But then, oh man, the black swan came flying in. The war in Ukraine, this sent shockwaves through the global commodity markets. Suddenly, everyone was scrambling to buy pure nickel. The price of nickel in just 2 days surged by a mind-blowing 250%. Can you even imagine 250%? If that happened to my tiny little investment portfolio, I'd probably just cry in a corner for a week. But for Tsingshan, this was a catastrophe of epic proportions. They were on the hook for billions of dollars in margin calls. If they could come up with the cash, they were facing what is called a forced liquidation, or a margin call, and they'd be bankrupt, owing tens of billions of dollars. Meanwhile, over in New York, the Wall Street wolves, the hedge fund managers who had bought up all this nickel, were probably popping champagne, ready to collect their easy billions. I can just picture them, all smug in their fancy offices. But back in Wenzhou, China, at Tsingshan's headquarters, the atmosphere must have been absolutely suffocating. The clock was ticking down on their financial doomsday. Then, at 8:15 a.m. London time on the 8th of March 2022, something unprecedented happened. The LME, the Grand Old London Metal Exchange, announced they were immediately suspending all nickel trading. Now, if you thought that was a big deal, you haven't heard the half of it. The LME then dropped another bombshell, a move that even the most seasoned financial pros in the West called heresy. They canceled all nickel trades that had taken place between midnight and 8:15 a.m. that very day. Every single trade, all the profits made during those 8 hours, poof, gone. Just like that, Wall Street absolutely lost its mind. Imagine being a hedge fund manager, seeing billions of dollars in profit, money you thought was already in your pocket, and then boom, it snatched away. We were talking about $3.9 billion that just vanished into thin air. The LME basically forced the buyers to spit out the fat profits they thought they had just swallowed. You know, those moments when you are just so mad you want to smash your keyboard. That is probably what was happening all over Wall Street. They were screaming, "What kind of free market is this? I played by the rules. I bought the price up. Why are you pulling the plug on me?" They argued that if prices had fallen, the LME wouldn't have cared about the short sellers. So why were they intervening? Just because the long positions, the buyers, were making too much money? It felt like the LME was just flipping the table because they didn't like how the game was going. Now, a lot of people online started saying, oh, the LME is owned by the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, so it has Chinese blood, and that is why they protected Tsingshan. And look, I get the tribalism, but honestly, that is a pretty naive way to look at the brutal reality of international finance. Capital doesn't have a nationality. Capital only cares about survival and destruction. It doesn't care about your feelings or whose side you are on. The real reason the LME pulled the plug, risking its reputation and facing potentially billions in lawsuits, wasn't to save Tsingshan, it was to save itself, and, more broadly, to save the entire European financial system. This brings me to something most regular folks like you and me probably don't know about. The ultimate hidden mechanism in the deep sea of finance, the clearinghouse and broker system. You might think Tsingshan placed its short bets directly with the LME, but that is not how it works in the big leagues of international commodities. The exchange doesn't deal directly with individual companies. There is an intermediary layer of clearing members, which are basically massive international banks like JP Chase, Standard Chartered, BNP Paribas, and so on. Think of it like this. The LME is a massive high-stakes casino, and these big banks like JP Morgan, they the VIP room hosts. Tsingshan is a high roller playing in one of those VIP rooms, borrowing money from JP Morgan to place its bets. JP Morgan then takes Tsingshan's orders and goes into the main casino hall, the LME, to place those bets against other players. This creates a terrifying chain reaction of responsibility. The LME only recognizes the big banks, not Tsingshan directly. So, when the price of nickel shot up to $100,000 per ton on the 8th of March, the system flagged that the short sellers, including Tsingshan, needed to pony up billions of dollars in margin. The LME wasn't calling Tsingshan, they were calling JP Morgan and Standard Chartered, essentially saying, hey, Your client's short position is blowing up, get $10 billion into the clearinghouse account by 9 a.m., or we reliquidating your entire position. At this point, JP Morgan and Standard Chartered have no choice but to turn to Tsingshan, essentially begging, "Boss, we need that $10 billion to cover your margin call. Like, now." But here's the thing, even if Tsingshan is a massive industrial powerhouse with valuable mines in Indonesia, how in the world are they going to conjure up $10 billion in cash in a few hours? The answer is, Tsingshan's boss would probably just throw his hands up and say, "Money, I don't have it." Physical nickel? Sorry, I only have high-purity nickel pig iron, and it doesn't meet the LME's delivery standards. And this, my friends, is the true reason the LME pulled the plug. If Tsingshan couldn't come up with the money and defaulted, who would be stuck with that multi-billion-dollar bill? JP Morgan, Standard Chartered, and the other brokers. They would have to dip into their own pockets to cover Tsingshan's debt, filling that massive financial black hole themselves. But the situation was even more extreme because nickel prices had jumped 250%. It wasn't just Tsingshan getting hammered. A whole bunch of other hedge funds and commodity traders who were also shorting nickel were facing massive losses and margin calls. If the LME had settled at $100,000 per ton, the London metal market would have been looking at a margin shortfall of nearly $20 billion. And guess who would be at the front of the line to cover those losses? You guessed it. Those intermediary banks. Imagine if the LME hadn't pulled the plug, if they had let the price stay at $100,000. By 9 a.m. that morning, several smaller brokerage firms would have gone bankrupt instantly, unable to come up with hundreds of millions or even billions to cover their clients' losses. And if those smaller firms went belly up, that bad debt would have pierced through the LME clearinghouse's risk default fund. Then even giants like JP Morgan Chase would have been hit with enormous bad debts, causing their financial statements to absolutely collapse. This wouldn't have been just one Chinese company going bankrupt. This would have been Lehman Brothers 2.0. This would have been a widespread brain death of the entire European and possibly global metal trading system. The CEO of the LME, Matthew Chamberlain, must have been sweating bullets in the control room, watching those skyrocketing numbers. Wall Street's buyers thought they were hunting a fat sheep, but Chamberlain saw clearly this sheep was strapped with tons of C4 explosives, and the detonator was wired to the main support beams of the entire London Metal Exchange. If the buyers had won, Tsingshan might have died, but the LME, a century-old institution, and dozens of core investment banks in London would have been reduced to rubble by morning. No one in the world would ever trust London for trading again. So faced with a choice between losing a bit of credibility and getting yelled at by Wall Street, or the entire financial system suffering a physical instantaneous meltdown, the LME made an incredibly clear-headed decision. Flip the table, everyone stop. Sorry, Wall Street friends. They were essentially saying that $3.9 billion you earned last night. System glitch, price anomaly. We don't recognize it. And not only that, but you are not allowed to trade for the next few days. Everyone just calm down. This move, oh man, it hit Wall Street's big players where it hurt. Top hedge funds like Elliott Management and quantitative trading giants like Jane Street were absolutely furious. They immediately sued the LME in the UK High Court, demanding $470 million in damages. Their lawyers were probably roaring in court. "We played by the rules. This is blatant robbery. You are stealing money from the winners to protect a defaulting short seller." But the LME's lawyers just calmly replied, "If we hadn't canceled those trades, the LME clearinghouse would have faced the collapse of several members that day, triggering systemic risk. We were saving the market." See, this is the deepest logic of the financial world. When your losses are so massive that they could drag down the entire system with you, there is only one real rule: the system must not die. And to keep the system alive, the rules can be changed at any time. The plug can be pulled whenever necessary. This is why we often say, the big guys can fall. Tsingshan Holdings, even though they were in dire straits, ironically had such a massive position that they essentially held the entire system hostage, buying themselves precious breathing room. But my friends, even though the plug was pulled and trading was suspended, Tsingshan's crisis was over. While the peak price of $100,000 was nullified, nickel prices were still hovering at an extremely high level, around $48,000 to $50,000. As soon as trading resumed, Tsingshan would still be facing forced liquidation and massive debt. Tsingshan's boss was still dangling by a thread. How could Tsingshan, unarmed and without the right kind of physical nickel, possibly withstand the inevitable new wave of attacks from Wall Street when the market reopened? Everyone knew this was just a pause. The fuse on the bomb hadn't been diffused. The LME could stay closed forever. As soon as trading resumed, nickel prices would still be incredibly high, around $50,000. Tsingshan's 150,000 tons of short positions still hung over their heads like a mountain. The Wall Street buyers hadn't gone anywhere. They were circling like hungry wolves outside the market, sharpening their knives, just waiting for the opening bell to blow up the price again and tear Tsingshan to shreds. Tsingshan's boss still stood on the edge of that cliff. To survive, he had to accomplish two seemingly impossible tasks within a few days. First, fill a multi-billion-dollar margin hole, and second, get the right kind of nickel. He needed high purity electrolytic nickel that met LME delivery standards to throw at the buyers and push the price down. Just when the whole world thought Tsingshan Holdings was doomed, a miracle, or rather the sheer power of their industrial might, emerged. Friends, remember this saying, if you owe the casino $1 million, that is your problem. But if you owe the casino $10 billion, that is the casino's problem. Tsingshan Holdings, as the world's largest nickel producer, is a massive industrial empire. In this life or death situation, if Tsingshan went down, the entire global new energy battery industry would be shaken to its core. And those international banks I mentioned earlier, they go down with it. So in a strangely silent agreement, a closed-door negotiation happened very quickly. On the night of the 14th of March, Tsingshan Holdings released an official statement that stunned the world. It was only a few short sentences, but every word hit Wall Street's buyers like a bombshell. First, the statement said that Tsingshan Holdings had reached a standstill agreement with a syndicate of major banks. What this means in plain English is that JP Morgan and those other big banks held their noses and agreed. They promised that during the standstill period, they absolutely would not force Tsingshan to liquidate its positions. And, get this, they would provide Tsingshan with enough credit to cover its margin calls. Wall Street's most powerful weapon, the margin call, had been neutralized. The second point in the statement was the real killer. Tsingshan Holdings announced they had secured sufficient physical nickel for delivery.